Well, welcome back everyone for our last session. This is a little outside of what we've been discussing, although directly related in so many ways. We talk so much about taxes and a little less on the revenue and what revenue needs there are out there. And in this case, specifically what we're talking about are the revenue needs as it relates to transportation in Idaho, which this group of folks that we have in front of us both have worked on, studied, and analyzed it more than just about anyone. So I'm very pleased to have all of them here. I'll first start by introducing Senator Winder, who's obviously been involved in Idaho politics for a number of years, first being elected to the Idaho Senate in 2008, serving in a variety of positions, including Senate Majority Leader, and serves on the Senate Education, Transportation, Senate State Affairs, has a background, of course, in the military as a naval aviator and flight instructor, and is a lifelong member of the United States Navy League. As it relates to transportation, anyone involved in transportation knows that the senator's been involved in that issue for decades. I don't know if we have highways named after him yet, but I suspect that
we will.
We will. It's that's bound to happen at some point. Wayne Hammon, again, happy to have Wayne with us today, a sixth-generation Idaho native, joining the Idaho Associated General Contractors in 2012 as their Chief Executive Officer. And before that, served 5 years as the administrator of the Idaho Division of Financial Management, or DFM, which Alex Adams was here in his prior role earlier, speaking to us. He also grew up on a small farm in Bingham County, received his BA and MA from Brigham Young University, and is an honorary associate alum. In his role as AGC, he has seen a host of funding or lack of funding issues in his tenure there, usually to one extreme or the other. Vanessa Crossgrove Fry is originally from Ohio, worked in a number of policy pursuits all over the country, utilizing her skills in nonprofit management, government relations, and working between connecting Idaho communities and enhancing quality of life and economic growth. And in this specific case, she's done a research project and research projects around transportation infrastructure and completed a study. And that's how we are going to begin our panel today, with the results of that study to help kick us off with some discussion. So with that, Vanessa, would you mind beginning and starting your presentation?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Miguel, for having me here today. I'm going to report on over a year-long study on transportation infrastructure in the state. We had a number of supporters that helped paid for the study. You can see here on the top of the slide. And then we had a number of two really important people and organizations that provided data. So that's LTAC and then ITD. And so they weren't funders of the study, but they were very important to make sure we were able to have the data we needed to do this work. Here's the study team. I want to thank my colleagues, Lance McGinnis-Brown, Gabe Osterhout, and Emily Pape. Without them, this project wouldn't have been possible. And I should give a big thanks to Wayne Hammon, who approached me about doing this study. It was the AGC that first had interest in this, and it was really Wayne who spearheaded getting all those other project partners. So I can't thank Wayne enough for that support. We have some experience at the Idaho Policy Institute doing work on transportation infrastructure assessments. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Idaho Policy Institute, in 2016, we were founded to be an objective research resource for decision makers. Our very first study is pictured here on the right, and that was a 2016 assessment of Idaho's transportation infrastructure, specifically looking at the consequences of investing in transportation infrastructure. This report that we did this year that we just wrapped up, we built off of our report, but more importantly, built off a report that the governor's task force released in 2011, then Governor Otter, and now Governor Little is actually the head of that task force. And so we built the report that I'm gonna give you a synopsis of today off of these two projects. This report, we wanted to answer a number of questions. We really wanted to see what the state of transportation infrastructure was in Idaho. We wanted to measure what has changed since the governor's task force report. And we wanted to see what alternatives are available to the State House and local decision makers to address any issues that we have with transportation infrastructure. So we went about answering these questions in a number of different ways. We really sat down and talked with all those stakeholders on one of those first couple slides. That's what we did at the beginning of our project to really get an understanding of what data was out there, who we needed to speak with and collect information from. And then we spoke with both local and statewide decision makers regarding the infrastructure. So this isn't just about the state's transportation system, but also local transportation system. And then we also analyzed alternatives. So rather than doing what the governor's task force report did and our 2016 report did, just looking at peer states around Idaho, we actually looked at alternatives across all 50 states for this project. And now that the project is done, we're reporting on it through a slide deck like the one that you're seeing today. We have a long written report. We have an interactive map of the policy alternatives, and I'll show you a screenshot of that in a bit. We have a dynamic financial model that helps us determine where the needs are and what potential revenue sources are available to meet those needs. And then we're giving presentations like the one I'm giving today. So first question, what has changed since 2010, 2011? Well, as everyone knows, we've seen tremendous population growth in the state, 14%. We've seen a 17% increase in licensed drivers and a 31% increase in registered vehicles. And the reason that's not a one-to-one, what we're seeing here is these are not just personal vehicles that are registered, but also commercial vehicles. So what we're seeing is economic growth has been tremendous as well. We've also saw the State House react to the governor's task force report that showed there was a gap in revenue need. And there's since then been over $130 million enhancement since 2015 towards transportation infrastructure support. Now, if we take a snapshot in time of what the infrastructure looks like today, transportation is hugely important to our economic development in the state. Over 250 million tons of products are moved across the state each year. Bike and pedestrian movement is becoming more and more important. Nearly 27,000 Idahoans either walk or bike to work every day. We're seeing more and more people use public transit. Just shy of 4 million passenger trips are taken each year. And then we have 1.8 million vehicle registrations in the state. Those are passenger vehicle registrations. So this is just a screenshot, not intended for you to look at the numbers on the screen, but just to get you an idea. If you go to Idaho Policy Institute's website, you can go ahead and you can play along with the dynamic financial model that we use to demonstrate that what we found to be a gap in need in transportation infrastructure. And the gap that we found is just under 242 million annually is necessary for the state to maintain existing infrastructure. So you can see we've divided it into the state system, the local system, and transit system. Those numbers in orange are the numbers needed annually for each of those types of systems just to maintain what we have. That doesn't include any capacity or safety enhancements. And so total for roads and bridges annually, it's 236.5 million. And then as you can see, 5.3 million to maintain existing transit equipment and infrastructure. So what are the consequences of us not having that revenue? Well, there's quite a few. These are just a couple. There's more in the report. So right now, and this is at a point in time, there's over 950 bridges that are in poor or fair condition in the state. And annually, on average, people are paying about $427 per person to pay for repairs of their car due to the poor infrastructure. So think a flat tire from hitting a pothole or chips from the road hitting your windshield. So we know there's a gap in the revenue. We know there's consequences of not filling that gap. And here are the alternatives that we explored that the individuals in the State House and the governor's office and across the state could consider to address those gaps. And so we divided it down into 6 different categories here. We can consider changing current user fees, so modifying the fuel tax or modifying registration fees. We can think about using new user fees, and that would be implementing some sort of road usage charge or vehicle miles traveled fee, or implement tolling. And let me pause here and say, these aren't recommendations from the Idaho Policy Institute. What are these are alternatives for consideration. So we as the Institute don't make recommendations. What we hope to do with this report is supply Senator Winder and his colleagues and others across the state with some ideas to consider. There could be some statewide funding that's accessed, for instance, the general fund use or modifying the sales tax. Local jurisdictions could also potentially have an opportunity to increase the revenue they have. So there is an option, and this would have to be enabling legislation at the state level, ability for more jurisdictions to implement a local option tax. Right now, there's only a small number of jurisdictions that are able to do that across the state. There's also the potential to consider modifying the impact fee structure. We could also consider different financing alternatives. We have great financing now. Garvey has been tremendous support to our infrastructure in the state, but there's some other things we haven't been doing. One is expanding our use of private-public partnerships, and another is enabling legislation that would allow us to set up a state infrastructure bank. And what that would allow the state to do is give low to no interest loans to jurisdictions to implement infrastructure projects, even at a very small level. And finally, one thing that we discovered when we were doing our research was that there are certain modes of transportation that the state of Idaho doesn't have a dedicated funding source for. And so that's something that could be considered as well. And that is transit funding and bike and pedestrian funding. So again, this is a screenshot of that alternatives map that I had mentioned that's interactive. You can go to our website and see what different states are doing in the way of Garvey or public-private partnerships and other sorts of revenue enhancement opportunities. And then just to wrap it up, a summary here of the revenue gap that we are able to establish with our reporting. So thanks, Miguel, for that opportunity.
Well, Vanessa, thank you. That was very informative and much faster than I realized as well. I think we'll stay on schedule. I'm sure we'll come back around to you, but with that, Senator Winder, I know you've looked at this anyway, and obviously with your experience, can you give some perspective on both this presentation in addition to you know, some of your thoughts, but both maybe from a historical perspective and to where we're at today?
Sure. Thank you, and really appreciate the study update. It's very helpful. It brought back memories of 2 interim committee sessions over the summers of 9 and 10, and then finally the report in 11, which I served on that committee. We came back with at that time, numbers that were somewhat in this range. But one of the things I think people have to realize is there's a difference between maintaining the system and being able to expand the system and meet congestion needs and expanded population growth. So as we look at the state of Idaho, the only major projects that have been really funded probably in the last 15 years have used Garvey funding. And that's primarily been on state highway system. It doesn't help the locals. You think about, you know, Ada County or Canyon County and all the growth that they're having, go up to Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls and all the growth they're having on local streets. It's a huge demand. So when it comes right down to it, I wouldn't doubt but what the local demand maybe isn't as high as the state's demand for money just to maintain it. And then you start trying to figure out how to deal with congestion. We've, you know, basically been fortunate with Garvey in Idaho because we hit it at a great time when the recession was going. As a result, we got some great bids. We saved literally millions and millions of dollars that enabled us to do more projects around the state. But I think my objective and those that were involved in going back to Governor Kempthorne in the Garvey program was, we want to save lives. We want to make it safer for people to raise their families, to move back and forth for transportation needs throughout our state, and really connect our state together. And that's the amazing part, I think, of what Garvey's done, is it's literally in that time period saved hundreds of lives in Idaho. Just take the I-90 or the 95 corridor going from the Oregon border, Jordan Valley, and up to the Canadian border. Probably one of the most dangerous sections of highway in the country, and it's significantly reduced those fatalities. So that's our goal, is making it safer. That's the first priority, but the next priority is moving product. Idaho's an export state. It has to move product out. It's in international markets, whether it's wheat, whether it's chips. I always remember Jack Simplot saying, someday Idaho's going to be known for potato chips and microchips. And that's exactly where we are today, is with food processing, which goes all over the world to feed people. And obviously we understand the impact that Micron and a lot of the spinoffs have had throughout our state and in our local economy. So transportation is a huge issue. We need to get behind it. We need to continue to fund it. And I personally thank Governor Little for making this one of his highest priorities for the coming session, because it is so important to people in Idaho. And I don't care whether you don't even have a car. You still need an ambulance. You still need fire protection. You still need police protection. So this is something we all have to work on together, and it's going to take a variety of funding mechanisms to do that. So thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, Senator. Wayne, can I go straight to you with the same question?
Yeah, I think that Senator Winters made the great connection between the study, which shows what the maintenance is. These are roads that we already have. This is what it takes to just maintain the flow that we have now, to what happens when there's not funding for expansion as well, because there are certain things we have to do. We have to add some expansion, or the quality gets so poor that it's not. We talk about one of the newest projects that just opened is the Northgate interchange in Pocatello. It's a great project. It comes off just north of the I-15 86 junction, and it opens up the whole north side of Chubbuck for development. That project did not use Garvey. It was funded through the state normal STIP program, but it was so far down the list that had we not used Garvey to fix I-84, we would never have gotten to I-15. And so I look at that and say, this is critical work that we have such a demand that there are people all over the state that are just going to be waiting and waiting until we can get there. And so being able to say we need ongoing revenue sources to take care of this backlog of maintenance, this backlog of repair, but also looking at what opportunities are there for another round of Garvey or a state's Garvey system, or use of the surplus. We heard the governor and Alex speak about this morning. These type of things that do that, all that moves along. And the other thing that I think that Senator Winter pointed out is we're not just talking about getting people to work 5 minutes faster or getting exports out. We're talking about lives. He mentioned I-95. Think of that road between Lewiston and Moscow and how many students were lost every year. Think of US 30 around Soda Springs. And if you've not been down there since the Garvey project was done, it's a completely different road. It's got passing lanes and truck lanes, and so many blind spots have been removed. None of that would have been possible without an investment. That's what makes Idaho great, is we want limited government. We don't want the bells and whistles, but we want to keep people safe. And I think people understand that keeping people safe and investing in transportation is an essential function of government that we must carry out if we're going to keep our state the way it is.
Yeah, and I just point out one thing, the Chubbuck interchange was actually a public-private partnership. Similar to what we did with Micron years ago for Isaacs Canyon, which is the furthest interchange at the Micron campus, where Micron actually put money into it. The state put money into it. At that time, Bill Clinton, who was the president, had an executive order that allowed us to move forward and basically to expedite the environmental process. And because had both private and public money in it. So we were basically within a year to 15 months under construction on that project.
Amazing.
And it made a huge difference in access to their campus. And we've seen it continue to grow and to prosper and have a significant impact on our state revenue.
There's an example of that. Northgate's, you're right, is that per example, not only did the developer put money in, but so did the city of Chubbuck, the city of Pocatello,
Right.
Bannock County, and the state all put resources into that to make that happen. We see that going on here in the Treasure Valley, where we're using the STARS program on Highway 55 and Highway 2026. If you drive down 2026 right now past the new Costco, and there's a Winco going in, there's 3 miles of road under construction. 2 of them are being funded through the STARS program. So the developer is paying for all that, and then he'll get that back as a tax credit to use in the future.
Actually, there's almost 3 miles of
Oh,
it.
3 miles.
Yeah.
If you go up 55, once you leave the village in Meridian towards the freeway, you'll see that there's 3 lanes headed northbound and only 2 lanes going southbound. Well, that's another STARS project. And now that the northbound lanes have been paid for, the credit has been expired, we're now getting ready to do the southbound lanes. And so there are all alternatives out there that doesn't necessarily mean raising a fee or taking money out of someone's pocket. But if we're smart about it, and like Senator Winter said, if we capture on the opportunities, when Garvey, those type of things come along, we can get a lot of bang for our buck in Idaho.
Wayne, maybe I'll just I'll tailcoat off that one. What other creative, I guess, you all have been around, and Senator Winter as well, Vanessa as well, if you'd like, of course. What are some of these creative, we've done some creative things in Idaho with transportation funding.
Yeah, I think.
What are we missing? What have we done? What have we learned from? What are we missing? What's still there? Maybe that's too many whys and what ifs, but
well, there's a couple that are highlighted in the report, and you go to Vanessa's website, the Idaho Public Policy, Idaho Policy
Institute.
Idaho Policy Institute. It catalogs, it does a great job of cataloging some of these, but there are options that I think we should look at. One of them is the State Infrastructure Bank. These have been proven to be successful in other states. Now, we have some rules in Idaho about local jurisdictions borrowing money, so we've got to work through all that. But with the State Infrastructure Bank, we come to opportunity to use federal TIFIA funds. And so by doing a little work at the state level, we then open up a new federal source of funding. Idaho is one of the few states that doesn't have access to that right now. So doing that is a possibility. I think we're working with a partnership. In fact, we're doing a conference next week on public-private partnerships and how to expand that in Idaho. We mentioned the Northgate interchange. There's been a few, but they're not a lot, and they go beyond transportation. In California, counties are using private money to build courthouses and jails and those type of hospitals, and then paying that back over time. And so working all those out so that it fits the Idaho way will take some work, but we're working on that. I think there are opportunities out there besides just raise another tax.
Yeah, and I think, the private-public partnerships, Canada is a great example. They build everything from schools to public buildings, to hospitals, to freeways and tunnels and all sorts of things by utilizing that. And you get into the international market. If you think about anybody that's traveled in Europe, most of those aren't owned by the state or the province that they're in. They're owned by a public-private partnership or an investor group that's come in and built them and getting paid back for them by a toll. And one of the funny stories I can remember, I always like to share, when Ada County was having trouble with its bridges and we were trying to figure out how we were going to fund them at the highway district, and someone suggested a toll, and one of my good friends said, yeah, we'll name the first toll bridge in Ada County the Winder Memorial Bridge. And so I got the message that probably wasn't very popular, but when you start thinking about, saving tax dollars and user fees, toll roads are actually a good way to finance public infrastructure.
And they've been used successfully across the West. In Colorado, they have a great tolling program where it doesn't impact lots of people's daily commutes, but it impacts those traveling through. It impacts truck traffic a lot more than it does, just running to the grocery store and have to pay a toll. There are ways to go about it that are smart that I think we could fit into it. I think what gets me when you look at Vanessa's map and you have all these 50 states and you look at all the different things, Idaho is a unique place and we're proud of doing things the Idaho way. And I think what we could do is take some of these national ideas and form them in an Idaho way that works for us. It's not going to work to put a toll road across, Butte County, but maybe there is a place, a bridge or something where it would be worthwhile to pay 50 cents to save 10 minutes of a commute or something like that.
Vanessa, do you have any additional comments on that?
No, I would just kind of add to what Wayne said about the state infrastructure bank. I didn't know a lot about it before this study, an opportunity to talk to quite a few people across the country and at the federal level, and really piques my curiosity. We're essentially leaving federal funds on the table by not allowing our local jurisdictions to have the match they need to access that money. And I think a state infrastructure bank would allow us to help those smaller jurisdictions that don't have the capital to do projects.
Yeah, very good. I appreciate that. Well, I did hear 2 comments about not raising taxes, which is good for a taxpayer organization to hear.
Miguel, one of the
thank
things
you
we like about ATI and your audience specifically is educated enough to know that taxes exist for a reason.
That's correct.
So we're not talking about just, hey, let's spend taxpayer. The last panel made a good point of that. But there's a reason for taxes. And if you're a manufacturer and you've got a product to move, transportation should be important to you. If you're a financial institution in Idaho and you're financing people building homes, transportation should be important to you. And it's worth a few cents at the pump to make Idaho's economy keep firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. The building of those sorts of things, it's an investment, not just a tax. It's investing in our state and our state's economy, which allows that additional revenue that we otherwise wouldn't have. So totally agree with that concept from a taxpayer group as well. It's investing money wisely. This might be a little more directed towards Senator Winder and Wayne. And if it's a no comment answer, that's fine. But any insight you want to provide or feel comfortable at this point providing related to legislation in the 2021 legislature, or is that something that's
Well, I would
on
just say
pause and in the works right now?
the governor, I think it's going to make it an issue and have it be a priority in his budgeting. Don't know exactly what that looks like yet. We're supposed to get a briefing on that this coming Friday. So we'll have a little better idea, but I think it's using some of the surplus for one time. Idaho has some pretty strict restrictions on any kind of public debt and how you allocate funds to pay that debt. And your interest rates and cost of money are based upon those types of things. And so I think there's going to be a real effort to really talk about this and how important it is. One of the great things about the construction industry is it generates jobs, and it generates really good paying jobs. And during the recession, going back to 2008 and 9, we kept people employed in Idaho through Garvey. We kept companies alive that probably wouldn't be alive today and employing people if it hadn't been for that program. So I think, it's got to be I call it kind of a grassroots effort. It's got to come from local governments. It's got to come from local businesses that are dependent upon transportation to let their elected officials know that there is a continuing need and that they're willing to participate in that. So I think it's going to have to come from a variety of directions, but I think there is an interest. We've been very reluctant to raise fuel tax because we just don't like raising taxes, but it's, if you look at it as a user fee and how you potentially could use, some of that money to do some big projects by bonding, take advantage of the low interest rates that we have, like we did with Garvey. That has some potential but also I think, one of the things we're looking at is the legislatures and the previous panel talked about, and that's how do you reduce the property tax burden on, homeowners in particular. So all this can play together. I think there's a way to reduce some taxes in the property area. I think there's a way to do some financing that's not detrimental to the taxpayer and actually helps them in the long run. And, you know, if we hadn't invested in the freeway here in this, you know, valley over the years, we'd be in pretty sad shape trying to have any justification for living here or raising our families here in a safe and quality of life manner. So it's important to have that balance.
Wayne, do you care to comment?
I would not ever, having been a former staffer to a governor, I would never want to get in front of the State of the State speech. And so we'll wait and see. I'm confident, though, that this is the year that this issue will be addressed. I've been all over in the last 3-4 months. I've been all over the state, and I've met with dozens, or, you know, not every legislator, but lots of legislators. And this issue has come up in every one of those meetings. Part of that is because they're meeting with me and they know it's important to me. But from the most conservative member of the legislature to the most liberal member of the legislature, I've heard my constituents are talking to me about transportation. My constituents are upset about congestion. My constituents are worried about an unsafe road. We've got to do something. And so I really think that the stars are aligning to do exactly what Senator Winter said. Provide tax relief and some investment at the same time to be able to move our state forward, keep the economy growing so that all Idaho remains the great place it is. And again, I'll leave it to the governor to decide what all those pieces are, but I really do think they're coming onto the chessboard this year to be done.
Very good. I appreciate that comment.
And typically what he does is he'll talk about a program, but he basically leaves it up to the legislature, the transportation committees and the public to come and testify and say what their needs are and what they're willing to support and not support. And so it has to develop from that. It can't just be from the top down. It's got to come again from business and community leaders across the state to make these kind of things happen.
Well, it's a really good comment, Senator Winder. And as Wayne mentioned, as a taxpayer organization, it's such a fine balance, because if you poll folks, do you want your property tax bill cut for your home? Do you want your tax cut? The answer is going to be yes. Do you want less congestion in the area in which you live? The answer is going to be yes. And it's a job of the folks sitting on the stage now and the governor and groups like ours to figure out how do all those pieces fit together. And that's what we're here, you know, discussing today.
You know, Miguel, one of the things that Dr. Fry's study points out is that there is no silver bullet. We can't just adopt an infrastructure bank and we're done. We can't just enable P3 legislation and be done. We can't just pass a single gas tax and be done. What the study really points out is that there's a wide variety of options, and each one of them has to be judged on their merits. And quite frankly, each one of them will have to be adjusted to fit the Idaho way. But it's going to take a package. It's going to take a plan similar to what we did before, that included a whole bunch of moving pieces all coming together to make it work, because there's no silver bullet on this issue.
I think we've kind of made them, but I'd like to afford each of you an opportunity for a closing comment or two, if you'd like to, maybe starting with you, Senator. You may have just made it, but is there anything you'd like to end
You know,
this
I just say
conversation
ditto
with?
to, you know, what I said earlier, so I don't need to take a lot of
I
time.
liked your last closing comment.
Or bore your audience, but this is going to take a grassroots effort. We know it's a significant problem of, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars annually to not only maintain the existing system, but to be able to expand it. And this isn't just an issue for Treasure Valley. This is an issue in Twin Falls and Idaho Falls and Pocatello. Go up north to Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. That whole 95 corridor from really Lewiston north. People are moving in here from all over the country because it's a high quality place to live. They like that it's still a very open and free state, you know, in spite of all the kind of rambling and rhetoric we hear maybe about COVID and the overreach of government. Just look across the country and see what's going on in other parts. This is still a wonderful place to live and to raise our families and to make our businesses prosper.
Well, I'm glad I asked you the question. That was a great closing comment. Wayne, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would just follow up on where the good senator left off, is that this is not a Boise problem. This is an Idaho problem. Drive on I-90 through Kootenai County, and we have a transportation problem. Try to get to Rexburg through Idaho Falls, so we have a transportation problem. We need a new interchange at 15 and 26, or 20, I guess it is. You could point to almost any part of the state and find a problem, and we're not going to be able to fix that piecemeal by piecemeal. We need a entire statewide, like the senator said, we need to all come together and figure out what works for all of us and do it. And I really do believe this is the year to make that happen.
Thank you, Wayne. That's great. And lastly, Dr. Fry, is there anything you'd like to? I know you've given this presentation a few times.
Yeah,
and,
a couple times. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to sit on the stage with these two amazing gentlemen. It's been great to work with them over the years. And just to reiterate, it's a statewide problem. It's not just an urban problem, just not a rural problem. And it's not just we can see it out there, the congestion. People are saying it's a problem. So the Idaho Policy Institute does an annual poll of the state, and we're seeing transportation increasingly be higher on the priority list of the people across the state of what they want to see the State House address. And so I think we're getting to a point, like Wayne said, the public support is out there too. It's just what are the decision makers, what's that package look like that's best for Idaho?
I think that's a great note to end on. And with all of you, we're approaching we're actually a little bit early, believe it or not, but we're approaching 3 o'clock, which was my objective for getting done with this panel. Thank you all for being here. This is candidly a little outside our traditional tax discussion. It's but it really is fitting the year. I think, Wayne, as you pointed out, these things all need to work together. We can't silo what we're doing in potential property tax cuts, with what we're doing in potential transportation funding increases, and it all works together. And I think a day like today helps us think a lot more about that. So with that, I'd like to sincerely thank the three of you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you so much. Yeah. If you'll stick with us on the crowd, I just had a few closing comments. I may ask my attendees to move from the stage, and I'll go take over the stage. Thank you all again. Thank you, Senator. Well, thank you to all of our panelists, our sponsors, our members, everyone involved with today. It's been unique for all of us, but I also think a very informative day. Appreciate all the support. I'd like to, before you sign off, just a couple of, again, final housekeeping issues. Be sure to check back into ati-taxinfo.com/2020 to sign out for continuing education, CLE or CPE. You'll also have a survey pop up when you leave the meeting. We certainly appreciate your feedback, and we do take that feedback and review it for next year's meeting. So please do fill that out. Thank you again to all of our folks who attended, folks who sponsored. It takes a lot of work to put this on, even when we're not all here together. So it is really appreciated. I hope today provided some valuable perspectives. I know that I learned some things. I hope you did. It's very unique times. We're all learning, if not on a daily basis, on a weekly or a monthly basis. There's something new. There's new information, and we're all working on this together. And candidly, I find it a very exciting time to be involved in politics and policy and in taxes, because we're evolving in an amazing pace, and there's a lot to be done. So again, I'm going to close as I opened with a quote from my founding president, Max Yost, which was titled under Memories. Life is full of memories. Fortunately, most of them are pleasant. They are great to help us over the rough spots. At times when we're at ease, it is a good feeling to reflect on the good ones. And there are times that there are bad memories, which should never be dealt upon, but which can be beneficial to improve one's judgment. I think that's something we should all keep in mind as we move forward in this next session and working together and finding solutions. So with that, thank you all, and today's meeting's adjourned.